surface needed. Told together you need a thesis statement. You need a thesis statement.
Hello and welcome to the videos. In this series of video clips, I'm going to be talking to you about writing and hopefully helping you to become a better writer, particularly a writer of academic papers. Why do we write at all? It's probably one of the most important inventions there is. Penicillin, sanitation, printing, the internet, computers, cars, agriculture, they're all extremely important inventions, but the knowledge of those inventions and the transmission of those techniques mostly relies on writing. It's no coincidence that during the Middle Ages, when literacy declined, the growth of civilization temporarily declined. Being a good writer is going to help your career, because if you can write good memos and write academic papers for conferences, it's going to help your career. When people write poorly or unclearly, careers end, relationships end, bridges fall down, wrong orders get placed, businesses lose money. So good writing, clear writing, is important. So that's one of the first things we should talk about. One of the goals of good writing is clear, informative writing. So how do we do that? Well, again, in particular, I'm talking about academic writing. Writing fiction, writing poetry, writing news stories, all of these are important and valuable types of writing, but I'm talking more particularly about academic writing or business writing. What do I mean by that? What I mean is that most academic writing is based on argumentation. What do I mean by an argument? One of the crazy things about the English language is that we have a massive vocabulary, but sometimes our words are not efficient. A word like argument covers several sub-meanings. An argument in common language usually involves anger. Two people at a nightclub are yelling at each other, "Keep your hands off my boyfriend." Two people who have an automobile accident, they might be having a loud argument based on anger. But an academic argument, by definition, is not necessarily angry or assertive at all. It's simply a position. Hamlet is crazy. Hamlet is not crazy. This country should sign a free trade agreement with Mexico because A, B, and C. Those are academic positions. So one of the first things you should understand about academic writing is that, out of necessity, it takes a position and defends it. You might be confused here because one of the goals in journalism or in informative writing, such as a Wikipedia article, is to be objective and fair and to explain all sides of the issue. Some academic writing is done in this style. But most academic texts or essays, at least in the humanities, are more like editorials. They take a position and support it. An argument paper assumes that the reader has some information about the subject and is expecting you to make an evaluation or explanation about what it all means. Is Hamlet crazy or isn't he? Well, which is it? The reader expects you to take a stand and to explain and provide evidence for it. You need to have a little bit of ego in writing an academic paper because your side is correct. You are trying to convince the other person your position is correct. That's not necessarily done with arrogance. It's simply a position that you are relying on and that forms the basis of your paper. Without an academic argument, your paper is worthless because it has no point. How you phrase that argumentation or the format or style of your argumentation can vary widely. You might have a predictive argument. Next year the American dollar will decrease in value because ABC. You might have an analysis argument. X Airlines went bankrupt because it did this, this, and this. That's more of an analysis argument. A process analysis argument might say the best way to build a bridge is by doing this, this, and this. You could have a comparative argument. A big university is better than a small university because ABC, or the opposite. Or pure argumentation, for lack of a better phrase. What would that be? This law should be passed because ABC. This law should not be passed because ABC. These arguments often rely on should statements or because statements. Another criteria we need to look at, whatever type or format of argumentation you're using, is that the argument be both useful and provable. What do we mean by a useful argument? Well, a useful argument. The lint in my belly button really itches because A, B, and C. Okay, that might be true, but it's a stupid argument and nobody cares. Well, what I also mean by a provable argument is one that's extendable or one that relies on some form of solid reasoning to prove. Jessica Alba is better than Jennifer Lopez because Jessica Alba is better looking. Okay, well, maybe a lot of guys would say that's a very useful argument. It's difficult to prove that sort of argument because you lack the sort of objective criteria that might help you form a judgment based on the two. Looks and physical attractiveness are very subjective. It would be difficult to make an academic argument out of that. Certainly you could talk about this in a bar room or in a dorm room, and guys certainly do. And you can form an opinion on these things, but it's not the sort of subject that you could make a useful academic argument out of, even leaving aside the subject matter. Okay, so we have a useful argument, one that's provable, one that takes some sort of format. So what do we do next? Okay, well, throughout this series of video clips, I'm going to be talking about three things: grammar, structure, content. I don't know why this is a puzzle to me, why the human brain seems to work well with threes. We watch movie trilogies in threes, and often threes just work, and I'm going to use a lot of them. But when I talk about different aspects of academic writing in this series, I'm going to talk a lot about grammar, structure, and content. What do I mean by that? By grammar, I mean, can you write logically correct sentences? Can you write grammatically correct sentences that make sense? That's the simplest part of writing, and for some reason, for some people, it's their primary experience in writing. It's sentence writing and being corrected on punctuation, spelling, or on grammatical parts of the sentence, such as word class. That's important, but that's really only 1/3 of writing. Once you master grammar writing, and I shouldn't say you master grammar writing, because even whatever proficiency level you have as a writer, you're always going to be thinking about those three different levels of writing. But let's move beyond grammar and talk about structure. What I mean by structure is, how do these sentences fit together into a coherent whole? So you might write grammatically correct sentences that have no connection to each other. Your first sentence is about your stomach ache. The second sentence is about a TV show you watched. The third sentence is about Zimbabwe. The fourth sentence is about the Austro-Hungarian Empire. All of those sentences have no connection. So by structure we mean, do these sentences form units? Do they form consistent paragraph units? And do those paragraphs form a structure of an essay? We'll talk about that more in the future. The third aspect is content. You might write correct grammatical sentences. They may form a coherent and consistent unit that moves from one idea to the next in perfect linear precision, and the whole thing might be garbage, or the whole thing might be meaningless. You might have an argument that's clearly not correct. You might have an argument with no proof or support. You might have a ridiculous argument, Or you might have a contradictory argument. You might begin your paper by saying policemen should carry guns, and then in the middle of your paper you say, oh, I changed my mind, policemen should not carry guns. You have an argument that's contradictory and inconsistent. So by content we mean, what is the value of the subject that you're writing about? Has your essay proven your argument? Has it explained things to the reader? Are your arguments clear? All of these things belong to the province of content. Well, we'll be talking about those things. But for now, what I want to tell you is perhaps the most important piece of advice in becoming a better writer. Even if you watch this one video clip and say, this is a piece of trash, this guy's an idiot, that's fine. But I hope you will remember one lesson, and that's the importance of 3 details of writing. Plan, write, edit. That's the most important thing I can tell you in becoming a better writer. Plan, write, edit. I teach composition as an English professor. Sometimes I give essay exams, and they're often timed exams out of necessity. I see roughly 2 different types of students when they write exams. One type says, okay, I have an hour, go, write. The other type says, okay, I'm going to take 5-10 minutes to get ready. They look kind of silly, but what they're doing is thinking about what they're going to write before they write it. Even though they've taken a few minutes to plan, those students usually get better grades because their papers are much more focused and consistent. If you don't plan your writing, well, there's 2 dangers. One danger is that you end up looking at a blank computer screen, and it's a very frightening experience to see that blank computer screen. You don't know how to start, and it's very intimidating because you have no roadmap and nothing to get you going. If you have a good outline, the paper is already well on its way and you know what to do on every page. When I wrote my master's thesis, my outline was about 20-30 pages, and that took a long time, but it saved me time because once I had that groundwork of information ready, I knew what I was doing on each page. So this is one thing you have to overcome because we have a human tendency to be lazy and to look at the short run. We say, I don't want to plan because it's extra work. But that work you do in advance is going to make the actual writing of the paper quicker because you already have a head start in where you're going with your thoughts. The other danger in not planning your writing is that you're a little bit like a drunk driver. You start talking about something, you move on to something else, you come back to subject A again, and you forget that you've already written about it. And at the end of the paper you have this meandering mess that drifts back and forth between topics. The third aspect of that series is editing. Normally when you write, you can return back to your writing later and cut out the pieces that don't fit or cut out the pieces that waste space. This is a series of steps that requires a lot of self-discipline because we tend to fall in love with our writing. We don't want to change it. We think it's beautiful the way it is. But that sort of self-discipline is going to make you a better writer as well, and is a valid third stage in the process of writing. One of the greatest writers of the 20th century, Fitzgerald, Hemingway. Fitzgerald wrote The Great Gatsby. Hemingway wrote The Farewell to Arms. The Sun Also Rises, sorry. Those 2 novelists, they were drinking buddies, and they helped each other on their drafts. The first draft of The Great Gatsby is not very good. I've seen it. He had Hemingway helping him to pare it down, to chop out the pieces that weren't necessary. Those are 2 high-level, high-functioning writers of literature. We all need an editor. We all need someone to help us take out the pieces that don't fit. And if you don't have someone else to edit, you can still edit yourself. But you need to give yourself some time between the stage of planning your paper, writing it, and editing it. Your brain needs to rest between those stages. As you're going to see throughout this series of clips, academic writing is part science and part art, and we're going to talk about both.